Hey guys, tonight we're trading the usual bedtime stories for a slow drift across endless dunes. Picture it, the Sahara stretching forever, a soft indigo sky above you, the sand cooling after a day that could melt the soles off a camel. The breeze is warm and dry, carrying a whisper of spices that once traveled thousands of miles. You can almost hear the faint rustle of parchment, pages that haven't felt a reader's touch for centuries. And honestly, you probably wouldn't last a day out here without a gallon of sunscreen and an industrial-sized water bottle. So it's a good thing you only have to imagine it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you're listening. I love knowing where and when you're tuning in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, sand sighing beneath your feet. The night so wide it makes your daily commute feel like a dollhouse. The horizon glows silver under a half moon, and the stars flicker like tiny lanterns from some ancient caravan. Your breath matches the slow rhythm of the desert wind, and the world outside your headphones starts to fade. Somewhere ahead lies Timbuktu, the name itself a lullaby of syllables. Long before it became a metaphor for the middle of nowhere, it was a lighthouse of knowledge. Imagine dusty manuscripts on astronomy, medicine and poetry stacked higher than the dune beside you. Centuries ago, scholars from as far as Granada and Cairo crossed these very sands, their robes stiff with Sultan stories, to debate mathematics under lantern light. It said a single book here could be worth more than a camel loaded with gold. Not that you'd want to haggle with a camel anyway. They're famously terrible negotiators. The air carries a faint scent of acacia smoke. Someone, miles away, brewing tea so strong it could jolt an insomniac awake. You catch yourself smiling at the thought of scholars sipping the same bitter brew while charting the stars. Historians still argue whether those gatherings sparked parts of Europe's Renaissance or simply stayed tucked away in desert libraries, waiting for a more patient century to listen. You pass a lone date palm, its shadow like a sundial on moonlit sand. The trunk feels rough beneath your hand, the same texture merchants once leaned against while tallying the weight of gold dust and salt slabs. Somewhere under your feet, layers of history rest quietly. Forgotten maps drawn on goatskin, herbal. Remedies that promise to cool fevers with the same ease this night cools the desert. You picture them, wrapped in cloth, hidden from heat and greed, and wonder how many still lie buried, a treasure that prefers silence to display. A playful gust lifts a ribbon of sand across your path, brushing your ankles like an absent-minded cat. The desert seems to breathe, exhale, and settle again. Maybe it's telling you a joke older than the pyramids, or maybe it's just reminding you that out here time is a suggestion, not a rule. Ahead, faint lights shimmer, could be stars, could be the flicker of a scholar's lamp from 500 years ago. Either way, you keep walking, ears tuned to the hush of history. Your footsteps are the punctuation in a story the Sahara has been drafting for millennia, and tonight you're part of the sentence. The moon drifts higher as you follow a faint path etched by centuries of caravan feet, and the desert opens like a velvet curtain to reveal Timbuktu. You reach the outskirts quietly, where low mud brick walls glow a soft honey color in the moonlight, their edges rounded as though sculpted by an ancient hand determined to make everything gentle. A single wooden door creaks as the wind slides past, and you picture traders long gone, salt merchants, scholars, poets, slipping through these same alleys, robes brushing the walls like whispers. The city was never built to impress with size. It was built to impress with thought. By the 14th century, Timbuktu pulsed with ideas more valuable than the gold caravans that fed it. Picture open courtyards lit by oil lamps, where men and women debated the motions of distant planets, while children balanced baskets of dates on their heads. Somewhere a stray goat bleats, its voice oddly confident for a midnight philosopher. You wander toward the Sankore Mosque, its minarets rising like giant sandcastles frozen in time. The air smells of clay and night-blooming flowers, a quiet perfume that sticks to your memory like the aftertaste of a strong espresso. Here, scholars once gathered under reed-covered awnings, unrolling manuscripts that stretched the imagination. As far as the desert stretched the horizon. Astronomical charts, medical treatises and poetry, an entire galaxy of thought contained in fragile paper and careful calligraphy. Some volumes were so precious that a single page could buy a herd of camels. You wonder if they ever worried about paper cuts. History is silent on that. A soft crunch underfoot interrupts your thoughts. It's only sand, but it reminds you of the countless sandals and bare feet that pressed the same ground. In a way, you're stepping through a palimpsest, the earth, itself a layered manuscript of everyone who came before. Historians still debate the exact size of the manuscript collections. Was it tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands? The numbers drift like desert mirages, shifting with each new discovery. You duck through a narrow passage and enter a courtyard where a breeze carries the faint notes of an old lute. Perhaps someone is practicing a melody written centuries ago, or maybe the desert is simply playing tricks on your ears. Either way, the sound curls around you like warm tea in a cool cup. You pause to listen, your heartbeat slowing to match the rhythm. A nearby wall bears faint etchings, geometric patterns, that once served as a secret mathematician's proof. You trace them with a fingertip, feeling the grit of time beneath your skin. A flash of modern humor crosses your mind. If these scholars had Wi-Fi, they might have invented memes before calculus. But maybe the absence of instant messages was the very reason ideas grew so deep. Moving deeper into the quarter, you catch the smell of roasting grains. Someone is awake, tending a midnight snack that would shame any late-night microwave burrito. You smile, because even in a city of scholars, hunger never sleeps. A cat darts across the path, tail high, as if it too is late for a lecture on astronomy. The moonlight reveals wooden shelves inside an open window, scrolls wrapped in leather, spines cracked but proud. You lean closer, resisting the urge to touch. It's said that some manuscripts contain medicinal recipes involving desert herbs and strangely powdered meteorite. Whether that worked or just added cosmic flair is something researchers still argue about over coffee. The night deepens, the air cooling enough to make you pull your robe, imaginary or not, a little tighter. You feel the city's quiet heartbeat, a slow pulse of knowledge and dust. This place once drew travelers from across Africa, the Middle East and even Europe, each step a testament to the magnetic pull of curiosity. And now you're part of that tradition, even if your journey required nothing more than a good pair of headphones and an open mind. A bell chimes in the distance, soft, deliberate, perhaps a call to late prayer, or maybe just a donkey shaking. Half sleep. Either way, you take it as a gentle cue to keep moving, to follow the sound deeper into the maze of learning and lanterns. Above you, the stars blaze like tiny campfires, and for a moment you feel as if the entire cosmos has settled, here ready to teach, ready to dream, while the rest of the world slumbers. You slip through a narrow archway, and suddenly the night widens into a vast moonlit square. The air hums with a quiet expectancy, as though every stone remembers 1,000 caravan arrivals. Ahead of you, the great trade routes converge, threads of gold and salt, of silk and stories, stretching away toward the Maghreb, toward the Mediterranean, toward worlds you can barely imagine. Here is where wealth once walked on camelback, and where the faint clink of coins mingled with the murmur of scholars. A breeze brushes your cheek, carrying a faint tang of salt from distant mines and a whisper of cardamom. You picture a line of camels silhouetted against the horizon, their bells chiming like a lazy metronome. Each beast carries slabs of salt so pure they could pass for marble, or pouches of gold dust glittering like starlight trapped in leather. Merchants trudge alongside, feet wrapped in cloth, eyes squinting against the moonlight. If you squint, too, you can almost see them, patient, practical, and probably dreaming of a proper mattress instead of a saddle. Historians still debate how much wealth truly flowed along these routes. Some say the value rivaled the riches of Europe's royal courts. Others argue the numbers were inflated, like a desert mirage. What's certain is that these roads were not just highways of trade, but of ideas, and that knowledge was the most precious cargo of all. You step closer to a caravanserai, its wooden gate half open. Inside, you catch the sweet smoke of cedar fires. and the warm murmur of many tongues, Berber, Arabic, Songhai, maybe even Italian from a stray adventurer who lost his map and his patience. Laughter bubbles from a shadowed corner where merchants haggle over the price of ostrich feathers. You can't help but imagine someone slipping in a dad joke about camel insurance, and you grin at the thought. The sand beneath your sandals feels cooler now, almost like fine velvet. A boy scampers past with a tray of steaming tea glasses, balancing them with the focus of an Olympic gymnast. He winks at you, a silent invitation to join the nightly ritual. The tea is thick with mint and sugar, a sweetness that cuts through the dry air. One sip and you feel the caffeine promise to outlast the moon, a quiet companion for scholars who plan to argue until dawn. Above, the stars spread in reckless abundance. Traders once steered by these same constellations, reading them the way you might scroll a familiar app. The North Star glows steady, a cosmic compass needle. You imagine a navigator pointing skyward, explaining to a skeptical newcomer that those tiny lights will keep them alive. No GPS required. The idea seems both daunting and romantic, like trusting a friend you've never met. Nearby, a storyteller gathers a small circle of listeners. His voice is low and melodic, wrapping the night in a gentle spell. He speaks of distant kingdoms where elephants carry sapphire thrones, of rivers lined with date palms so sweet they make honey taste plain. You lean in without realizing, the cadence of his words syncing with your heartbeat. The crowd chuckles at a sly punchline about a merchant who mistook a sandstorm for a wedding procession. Even in a city of scholars, humor finds its way like water through stone. The storyteller shifts to a tale of a lost caravan swallowed by a sudden storm, manuscripts scattered like startled birds. Some say the wind still carries scraps of those texts across the dunes, and if you listen closely, you can hear verses in the breeze. You pause, eyes closed, and for a moment, the whisper of sand almost sounds like a page turning. As the night deepens, you sense the hidden order in this chaos of trade and talk. Knowledge moves here as silently as the moon's shadow, each traveler carrying not just goods, but questions, each conversation a spark that could light a continent. And through it all, the Sahara keeps its secrets, patient as ever, letting only the quietest of travelers, like you, hear its soft, eternal sigh. The square empties as the last merchants retreat behind carved wooden doors, and you follow a narrow alley that twists like a thought you almost forgot. The silence is deeper here, a velvet hush broken only by the faint scratch of a quill. Oi. Lantern flickers behind a latticed window, and the scent of ink drifts into the night, a perfume of curiosity that clings to the air like the aftertaste of strong coffee. You lean closer and glimpse a small room where a scribe bends over a parchment, so thin it seems made of moonlight. His reed pen dances in steady arcs, dipping into ink the color of midnight. Every stroke carries centuries of patience, a language looping across the page like quiet music. He pauses only to stretch his cramped fingers, then resumes, as if afraid. The words might run away if he stops. Historians still debate how many such manuscripts once filled Timbuktu. Some swear it was hundreds of thousands, others call that number a romantic exaggeration. Either way, the sheer devotion is undeniable. A sudden gust flutters the edge of the parchment. The scribe calmly weights it with a smooth desert stone, as if taming a restless bird. You imagine the texts he copies, treatises on astronomy that chart the wandering planets, medical recipes involving desert herbs and powdered meteorite, poetry that drifts like sand through generations. Each page is a small act of defiance against forgetting, a quiet rebellion written in ink and hope. You continue along the alley, walls warm to the touch even at midnight. Overhead, the sky glitters with so many stars, it feels like the universe left its lights on. You catch yourself making a modern comparison. If the Milky Way had a social feed, tonight it's definitely posting in high resolution. Somewhere, a dog barks once and falls silent, as if embarrassed by its own enthusiasm. Turning a corner, you enter a courtyard where stacks of manuscripts rest inside woven baskets. They're wrapped in soft leather, each one smelling faintly of cedar and time. A cat slinks across the baskets, tail brushing titles that no human has read in centuries. You imagine it's the unofficial librarian, silently judging anyone who dares disturb the order. Cats have always been good at that. A young apprentice sits cross-legged nearby, grinding pigments in a small stone bowl. The colors, deep indigo, rusty ochre, catch the moonlight like jewels. He hums an old tune, the melody looping in gentle circles. You crouch beside him, drawn by the hypnotic motion. He looks up, smiles as if he's known you forever, then returns to his work without a word. Some bonds require no language at all. From a neighboring room drifts the low murmur of debate, two scholars arguing about the movement of a comet recorded decades earlier. Their voices rise and fall, calm but insistent. The tale was longer than a caravan, one insists. Nonsense, it barely spanned a minaret, counters the other. You grin, imagining how these discussions might last until dawn, fueled by tea and an endless supply of cosmic curiosity. A soft rain of sand hisses down a nearby wall, just the desert settling for the night. You brush a grain from your sleeve and think of how fragile this knowledge is, each manuscript a heartbeat away from oblivion. Yet here they remain, stubborn against time and weather, as if the desert itself conspires to preserve them. Scholars. Today still argue whether the dry air or sheer luck saved these treasures. Maybe it's both, or maybe the Sahara simply likes a good secret. You linger a while longer, listening to the quiet scratch of pens and the distant hoot of an owl. The city feels alive but unhurried, a mind deep in thought. When you finally rise, the alley seems to welcome you back, guiding your steps with moonlight. Somewhere beyond, the next chapter of the Sahara's hidden libraries waits, patient as the stars, ready to unfold under your careful, sleepy gaze. The alley narrows until it feels like a hallway between centuries, and then it spills you gently into an open courtyard, where the sand lies undisturbed, a smooth canvas brushed by moonlight. A soft breath of air stirs the date palms overhead, and the fronds click together with the quiet insistence of an old clock. You pause, letting your eyes adjust to the deeper shadows. Ahead rises a low, weathered wall of mud brick, its surface studded with wooden beams like ribs, holding a living heart. This is no ordinary home. This is one of the hidden desert monasteries, a place where the Sahara keeps its most stubborn secrets. You cross the threshold, the door creaking with a sigh, as if it remembers every visitor who ever dared enter. Inside, the air is cooler and carries the faint aroma of cedar oil and long-burnt incense. The scent is so steady it feels like a welcome from another age. Your footsteps barely disturb the packed earth floor. Lamps made of hammered brass throw quiet pools of light across shelves built into the walls, and for a moment you wonder if you've wandered into the inside of a giant seashell, each curve holding echoes of the ocean that left this desert behind. The monks here, or rather the keepers, because their roles blur between scholar and hermit, are people of few words. You sense them more than you see them, a rustle of fabric in a distant hallway, the hush of sandals on stone. They have learned the art of silence so thoroughly that even their breathing seems measured by some cosmic metronome. You imagine their days, rising with the first thin streak of dawn, grinding ink from soot and honey, copying line after line of wisdom while the desert outside roars with heat. Modern deadlines would shrivel in their calm. If you tried to rush them, they'd probably just offer you tea and keep writing. On a shelf near the door rests a stack of manuscripts bound in goat leather, their pages a pale amber from centuries of sun and candle smoke. You reach out but stop short, the way you would in a museum when the guard raises an eyebrow. Each text is a quiet survivor, carrying herbal remedies, star charts, and law codes that once governed entire caravans. Historians still debate which monastery hid the greatest treasures. Was it here or farther south in the Sahel? No one agrees, and perhaps the desert prefers it that way. A whisper draws your attention to a side room lit by a single lantern. The keeper sits cross-legged, his posture as steady as a mountain. He is reading a manuscript spread across his knees, the calligraphy so fine it could pass for lace. Without looking up, he turns a page with the gentlest flick of a finger, as if the parchment might dissolve at a sudden movement. You imagine the stories he guards, a map of stars that guided sailors before compasses were common. a recipe for a salve made from desert lilies that could soothe a fever better than any modern pill, a poem written to a lost lover whose name has faded like ink in sunlight. The keeper finally glances at you and gives the smallest nod, an invitation without words. You settle onto a woven mat, the fibers prickling your palms. He pours tea from a clay pot, the stream a thin silver line in the lantern glow. The first sip is sharp with mint and smoke, strong enough to wake a camel from a nap, but somehow soothing all the same. You exhale, and the room seems to breathe with you. Outside, a faint hiss of wind gathers. It threads through the wooden beams, carrying a note like a faraway flute. The keeper tilts his head, listening as though the desert itself is reciting a verse. "The sands speak when they choose," he finally says, voice low and dry like ancient paper. "Tonight they tell of storms." Then he falls silent again, and you wonder how many times he has heard such a warning and simply kept writing. A small door at the back opens onto a garden the size of a single camel's footprint. There, herbs grow in shallow clay basins, mint, artemisia, and a spiky plant whose scent suggests both citrus and mystery. You brush a leaf and the fragrance bursts upward, bright and clean against the dusty night. These are the ingredients of the monastery's medicines, remedies whispered across generations. Some say the monks once treated traveling kings and wandering philosophers, their cures rivaling the best of Alexandria. Modern doctors might scoff, but you suspect these quiet healers knew things textbooks have long forgotten. As you linger, a sudden shiver runs through the air. A breeze stronger than before rattles the wooden beams, sending a sprinkle of sand across the floor like a subtle reminder of the outside world. The keeper stands, his robes swaying like a dune in motion, and carefully shutters the lantern. Darkness folds around you, gentle and complete. For a heartbeat, you feel the weight of the desert pressing close, the way silence can feel heavier than sound. Then, faintly, the stars reclaim the room. Light seeps through a narrow skylight, a pale ribbon that falls directly onto a single manuscript lying on a pedestal. The keeper lays a hand on it with reverence. "This one," he whispers, "has crossed more deserts than you can count." He does not explain further, and you do not ask. Some truths are meant to be felt, not catalogued. You sit with him until the night deepens into an almost tangible stillness. Outside, the storm gathers but does not strike, a distant hush like a giant exhaling. The keeper returns to his seat, lifts his quill and resumes the slow dance of ink and parchment. The scratch of his pen blends with the sigh of the wind, a duet of time and patience. You realize that this is what endurance sounds like. The quiet insistence of knowledge refusing to fade. When you finally rise to leave, the keeper offers a small bow, nothing more. The courtyard beyond is bathed in moonlight, the sand cool beneath your feet, and the night smells of ink, cedar, and secrets too old to name. You step back into the open desert, the monastery shrinking behind you until it is just another shadow among dunes. Yet its calm lingers, a silent promise that even in the most relentless places, wisdom can take root and wait, unhurried, for the next curious traveler, you, to listen. The desert air greets you again with a dry kiss as you leave the monastery behind, a hush so profound that even your heartbeat seems to tiptoe. Ahead, faint torchlight wavers along the outer walls of Timbuktu's old royal quarter, where the scent of smoke and spices lingers like a memory. You follow it, drawn as much by curiosity as by the gentle pull of the night. The sand underfoot feels cooler now, the grains shifting like 1,000 tiny hourglasses, keeping their own secret time. You soon reach a broad terrace of stone, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. This was once the gathering place of kings and envoys, a stage for ambition beneath the endless sky. The moon casts silver lines across carved wooden doors inlaid with brass patterns that catch the light like a quiet constellation. Here power once flowed as silently as the Niger River beyond the dunes, and knowledge, those fragile manuscripts you saw earlier, was currency as potent as gold. The rulers knew it, the scholars knew it, and the desert, as always, kept its impartial watch. You lean against a pillar still warm from the day's sun, and imagine the councils that once convened in these halls. Kings in robes dyed with indigo as deep as midnight, advisors in crisp white cotton, scholars clutching scrolls like shields of reason. They debated trade routes, alliances, and the worth of a single page of wisdom. Some say a rare manuscript could fetch more than an entire caravan of salt or gold. Historians still argue about the exact values, but everyone agrees that here, in the heart of the Sahara, learning was the truest sign of wealth. A faint echo of laughter drifts across the courtyard, soft, teasing, almost conspiratorial. You can almost picture a young prince sneaking a joke during a serious council, earning a discreet glare from an elder. Power may be grand, but humor has always been a quiet rebel. Somewhere a door creaks open, releasing a trace of cardamom and roasted grains. Your stomach answers with a low grumble, reminding you that royalty and common traveler alike share the same late-night hunger. You move deeper into the quarter and discover a grand chamber whose walls are lined with carved niches. Each niche once held manuscripts bound in leather, some gilded, others marked only by careful ink. The ceiling above rises into a shallow dome, the plaster etched with geometric stars that seem to spin when you tilt your head. The artistry feels almost playful, as if the architects wanted to remind every visiting diplomat that the universe is bigger than any empire. You can't help but think of modern boardrooms and their bland ceilings. This place would put them all to shame. A guard of long ago might have stood where you stand now, spear upright, eyes alert to protect not jewels, but ideas. The thought makes you smile. Imagine a warrior whose primary mission was to keep a poem safe. You'd sign up for that duty, provided the uniform came with breathable fabric and maybe a camel with good manners. From an adjoining hall, a subtle chorus of voices rises. They speak in low tones, Arabic, blending with Songhai and something you can't quite place, like the lingering scent of a forgotten spice. You recognize the cadence of debate, the ebb and flow of minds at work. Perhaps the topic is trade tariffs or a newly charted star, or the best way to brew tea strong enough to outlast a desert night. The details are lost to time, but the energy remains a gentle vibration in the stone itself. As you walk, your hand glides along a wall cool as river clay. Faint inscriptions spiral across it, verses from the Quran, lines of poetry, fragments of lore. Some letters are so worn they resemble the trails of migrating birds. Historians still puzzle over certain symbols. Were they decorative flourishes or hidden equations? The debate continues, fueled by coffee and the occasional dramatic shrug. Outside, a sudden breeze sweeps the terrace, carrying a veil of sand that sparkles in the moonlight like a galaxy in miniature. You pull your robe tighter, but the wind is more playful than fierce, ruffling your hair with a mischievous flick. It seems to whisper a desert joke. Try keeping secrets when even the sand likes to gossip. You chuckle quietly, half expecting the dunes to grin back. Farther along the royal quarter, you come upon a secluded alcove where a single torch burns, its flame steady despite the breeze. On a stone bench sits an elderly woman in a deep indigo shawl, her eyes reflecting the torchlight like polished amber. She nods as if she's been expecting you. Without words, she gestures to the stars above and then to the manuscripts tucked in a satchel at her side. Her presence feels both regal and intimate, as if she carries the authority of the past and the ease of a grandmother offering bedtime tales. She reaches into the satchel and withdraws a single parchment, its edges frayed, like the hem of a beloved cloak. The script is bold yet graceful, a dance of ink that speaks of comets, eclipses, and the rhythm of the seasons. "These are the maps of the heavens," she murmurs, her voice soft but sure. Kings once waited for these charts before declaring war or planting grain. She taps the parchment gently. Still, the stars obey no throne. Her words settle in the air like fine dust, and you feel the weight of truth wrapped in calm amusement. The woman rises, her shawl catching the moonlight, and disappears into a side corridor without another sound. You stand alone beneath the star-strewn sky, the echo of her wisdom humming like a quiet drumbeat. Around you the royal quarter sleeps, but its stories remain awake, threaded through every stone and shadow. You linger, breathing in the mingled sense of spice and old cedar, and consider how power has always courted knowledge, sometimes to share it, sometimes to hoard it. The manuscripts you glimpsed are more than relics. They are the quiet rebellion of memory against oblivion. And tonight, under the infinite dome of desert sky, you are both witness and participant, another link in the long chain of those who seek understanding, even as the sand shifts and the stars continue their patient dance overhead. You leave the royal quarter behind, the faint scent of cardamom still clinging to your sleeves, and step back into the open night where the desert stretches wide and watchful. The sky feels lower now, heavy with starlight, the Milky Way a pale river cutting through blackness. Your sandals sink into cooler sand, and each step sounds like a soft sigh. Somewhere in the distance, a lone jackal calls, its voice thin and haunting, quickly swallowed by the immensity of silence. You pull your robe tighter, amused by the thought that even silence in the Sahara has its own echo. The wind begins to shift, carrying a dry hiss that brushes the back of your neck like a whispered warning. Ahead, the dunes ripple like frozen waves under the moon. You pause, noticing how the horizon flickers, not with light but with movement, tiny spirals of sand lifting into the air. A storm is waking, slow but certain, as if the desert has decided it's time to rewrite its own landscape. You remember the keeper's quiet prediction from the monastery. The sands speak when they choose. Tonight, they have chosen. The breeze stiffens into a steady current, and grains of sand sting lightly against your skin, sharp as ground cinnamon. You taste salt and dust on your lips. The dunes ahead shift almost imperceptibly, a slow dance that hides and reveals with each gust. In the distance you catch faint glimmers, perhaps moonlight on swirling sand, or perhaps the reflections of something older, something that once stood proud before the desert claimed it. Historians still debate how many entire libraries the Sahara has swallowed, and whether manuscripts remain buried like seeds waiting for a gentler age. Some claim that entire caravans of scrolls were lost in storms like this, their knowledge dispersed grain by grain, until only the wind could read them. You move forward, the air humming with static. The desert seems alive now, breathing in long, slow pulses. Each gust carries a faint rustle like pages turning in a giant invisible book. You imagine scholars long gone trying to chase runaway manuscripts, their robes flapping like startled birds. One might have cursed softly in a language now forgotten, another laughing despite the chaos. The idea of ancient academics sprinting through a sandstorm makes you grin, a reminder that even great minds sometimes lose to weather. The wind builds, filling your ears with a low, steady roar. Sand drifts across your path in silver ribbons, catching moonlight like liquid metal. You pull your robe across your face, eyes squinting. Yet beneath the commotion lies a strange calm, a rhythm that lulls rather than alarms. The desert is powerful, yes, but tonight it seems more intent on storytelling than destruction. You find yourself leaning into its voice, each gust a new chapter. A sudden swirl clears a patch of ground, revealing a fragment of something dark and straight. Wood, perhaps, or the edge of an old leather-bound chest. You crouch and brush gently with your fingers. The object is smooth, impossibly well preserved for something that has slept under dunes for centuries. A corner of cracked parchment peeks out, the ink faded to a soft brown. You trace a single line of script, elegant and unreadable, and feel a thrill that tightens your chest. Could this be one of the lost texts? Scholars today would argue for years over such a discovery, debating authenticity and provenance over endless cups of coffee. You, however, simply marvel at the quiet persistence of knowledge. The storm swells, sand swirling in a graceful frenzy around you. Yet the fragment remains exposed, almost defiantly. You imagine the caravan that once carried it, camels laden, with books wrapped in leather, travelers wrapped in indigo, their faces hidden but their eyes bright with purpose. Maybe a sudden squall like this one overtook them, scattering their precious cargo across the dunes. Maybe they believed the desert a thief, when in truth it was a guardian with an odd sense of humor. Another gust lifts your hood, sending grains of sand through your hair like glitter at a party you didn't plan to attend. You laugh quietly, the sound swallowed by the wind. It occurs to you that storms like these are nature's way of editing the earth, erasing old sentences, writing new ones, leaving footnotes only the patient will ever find. You brush more sand from the parchment, revealing a faint illustration of stars arranged in a pattern unfamiliar to modern charts. Perhaps it maps a comet long forgotten, or a trade route now buried. Perhaps it's simply a doodle by a bored scribe waiting for tea. The wind shifts again, softer now, as if satisfied with its performance. The roar fades to a steady hum, and the dunes settle like a giant animal curling back into sleep. The piece of parchment lies quiet, half revealed, a secret offered without explanation. You consider taking it, but something in the desert's steady gaze persuades you otherwise. Some discoveries belong to the moment, not the pocket. As the storm drifts, away the night regains its clarity. Stars shine sharper, and the moon emerges from a gauzy veil of sand. You stand slowly, brushing grit from your robe, and feel the curious calm that follows chaos. It's the hush after a good joke, the breath after a long song. The desert exhales, and you breathe with it. You resume your walk, the sand beneath your feet newly sculpted, patterns shifting with each step. Behind you, the fragment of parchment glows faintly in the moonlight, a reminder that even what is lost can briefly return. Ahead, faint lanterns flicker where scholars once debated under open skies. You imagine their conversations about stars and medicine, about law and love, some arguments playful, others fierce, all of them swept in time into the same gentle silence. A final breeze nudges your shoulder, as if to say, keep moving. You smile, recognizing the nudge of an old friend. The Sahara has spoken tonight, through wind, through sand, through a single stubborn scrap of history, and you have listened. You step forward into the calmer night, carrying the storm's story with you, the sound of invisible pages still turning softly in your ears. The desert quiets after the storm, a hush so complete you can hear your own breath slide in and out, slow and deliberate. Each step sinks slightly into the sand, leaving shallow impressions that the wind will erase before morning. Overhead, the moon has sharpened to a white coin, and the stars look freshly polished, as if the storm was nothing more than the Sahara dusting its jewelry for the night. You walk on, the taste of grit still on your lips, and imagine how many travelers have felt the same dry rasp on their tongues, how many have looked up and wondered if the sky itself was a kind of library, each star a glowing manuscript. Far ahead, a warm glow shimmers at ground level, too steady to be a mirage. You follow it across a dune that curves like the back of a sleeping whale and descend into a shallow hollow. There, a single tent stands, low and wide, its fabric striped in earth tones that blend almost perfectly with the sand. From inside comes the faint, rhythmic scratch of a quill. You pause, smiling at the familiarity of the sound. Ink on parchment, the heartbeat of memory. You lift the flap and duck inside. A lone scribe sits cross-legged on a woven mat, his posture patient as a mountain. The lantern beside him throws golden light over a small desk scattered with parchment reeds and a clay pot of ink dark as midnight tea. He looks up briefly, eyes calm, and gives a small nod before returning to his work, as if visitors from the future are no more surprising than a change in the wind. You settle quietly opposite him, drawn by the hypnotic rhythm of his pen. His hand moves with unhurried precision, forming letters in a script that curls like tendrils of smoke. Each stroke feels deliberate, a quiet defiance against the chaos of sand and time. You notice faint stains of indigo on his fingertips and wonder if he ever forgets where ink ends and skin begins. Perhaps he no longer bothers to tell the difference. After all, when you live to write, the body itself becomes a manuscript. A second figure emerges from the shadows, a young apprentice carrying a shallow bowl of fresh ink. The boy's eyes flash with a quick, mischievous light as he sets the bowl down. "Careful," he whispers with a grin. "The wind likes to drink our ink when we're not watching." You laugh softly, the sound blending with the warm hush of the tent. The scribe glances up and allows the ghost of a smile, the sort that lives halfway between amusement and infinite patience. The boy sits beside you and begins grinding a lump of dried pigment with a stone pestle. The smell of cedar and smoke rises, strangely comforting, like an old library on a rainy day. He leans closer and confides, "Some nights the sand scratches at the walls like a cat." We keep writing anyway. The desert can wait. His voice is matter of fact, but you hear a quiet pride underneath, an unshakable belief that words outlast wind. Outside, the breeze stirs again, brushing the tent in slow waves. The fabric sighs, like a giant bellows, but the scribe keeps writing, untroubled. You watch as he completes a page dense with diagrams of stars, arcs, dots, tiny notations that look like music for the night sky. Historians still debate whether such manuscripts were meant for navigation, for ritual, or simply for wonder. Perhaps all three, perhaps none. The mystery is part of the lullaby. The apprentice offers you a cup of tea so strong it could convince an owl to pull an all-nighter. You sip, feeling the sweetness of mint cut through the bitterness of desert air. A slow warmth spreads from your chest outward, loosening the last tension left by the storm. The boy watches you, amused. "It keeps the sand out of your thoughts," he says. You nod, understanding more than you can explain. The scribe pauses to stretch his hands, joints cracking softly like dry twigs. He turns the parchment toward you. Even without reading the language, you sense the gravity in its lines, a chart of planets perhaps, or a record of trade winds long forgotten. Tiny illustrations of moons and comets orbit the text like playful children. You trace the air above them, careful not to touch. The ink seems to hum faintly, as if the universe itself approves. For a while you simply sit, the three of you bound by the gentle music of ink and silence. The desert outside rustles, but inside, the tent time folds in on itself, a quiet spiral where centuries overlap. You think of modern distractions, notifications, algorithms, the constant ping of urgency, and marvel at the serenity here. Maybe this is what learning was always meant to feel like, steady, intimate, free of hurry. The apprentice eventually leans back, yawning. He points to a stack of finished pages tied neatly with twine. "These will travel tomorrow," he says, voice soft with pride. "To the river, then beyond. Knowledge walks farther than any caravan." You picture these manuscripts riding on camelback, crossing deserts and seas, slipping into cities where people will one day look up at the same stars and trace the same lines. The thought is oddly soothing, like knowing a bedtime story will always find a new listener. The scribe finally sets down his pen and regards you with eyes that reflect both lamplight and starlight. "The sands remember," he says quietly. "Our task is only to give them words." It's half statement, half blessing, and it settles into you like warm sand filling a footprint. You bow slightly, a silent thank you, and he returns to his work as if the conversation were merely another stroke of the quill. You rise, careful not to disturb the delicate order of the tent. The apprentice follows you to the flap and holds it open. Cool night air rushes in, carrying a faint scent of ink and cedar. "The stars will guide you," he says with a grin that belongs equally to mischief and faith. Then he disappears back inside, a small shadow among larger ones. Stepping outside, you find the storm has left the dunes sculpted into new shapes, soft curves gleaming like silver silk. The moon bathes everything in a quiet glow, and the silence feels not empty but full, as if the desert itself is pausing to admire the work of its patient scribes. You glance back once. The tent stands serene against the endless sand, lantern light flickering like a solitary star. Then you turn toward the horizon, your path lit by constellations charted long before you were born, carrying with you the hush of ink on parchment and the certainty that somewhere words are still being written for a future that will listen. The dunes rise and fall like a sleeping ocean as you continue your quiet journey, the desert now hushed after the restless drama of wind and sand. Your footprints sink softly, erased almost the moment they appear, as if the Sahara itself prefers to keep you anonymous. Ahead a faint murmur swells and fades, not the wind this time but something more deliberate, a pulse of human voices threaded through the night. You follow the sound, curiosity stretching your stride, until a soft amber glow appears beyond a ridge. You crest the dune and discover a broad courtyard, ringed with low mud brick walls, their edges glowing under oil lamps. Here scholars have gathered for what looks like an impromptu midnight assembly. Blankets and cushions scatter the sand, forming small islands of comfort. Brass lanterns sway gently, their light catching the occasional swirl of dust and turning it to glitter. You pause, savoring the way the scene feels both timeless and surprisingly cozy, like a book club that just happens to meet under a billion stars. As you step closer, you catch fragments of conversation in many tongues. Songhai, Arabic, Fulani, even a melodic dialect you can't quite place. The voices rise and fall like the gentle lap of waves. At the center, an elder with a beard as white as the moon sits cross-legged, a manuscript balanced on his knees. Around him, a circle of listeners leans forward, eyes shining with the kind of attention that can't be faked. You slip into the outer ring, unnoticed but welcome, the night air cool against your skin. The elder begins to read in a low, rhythmic voice that immediately quiets every stray thought. His words weave a tale of celestial movements, the slow waltz of planets, the sudden brilliance of a comet that startled travelers centuries ago. He describes how scholars once charted its path with nothing more than careful eyes and an endless patience, drawing diagrams by lantern light while the desert slept around them. Historians today still debate whether that comet was the same one later recorded in Europe or an entirely different wanderer. The uncertainty lingers like an unresolved chord, somehow more soothing than any final answer. You lean back on your elbows, letting the sound of the elder's voice mix with the soft hiss of the sand cooling in the night. A young student beside you passes a small cup of tea, sweet with mint and surprisingly strong. The heat slides down your throat and spreads through your chest, a warmth that feels like permission to stay awake just a little longer. The student grins and whispers, "The tea outlasts the stars," and you chuckle quietly, certain that whoever first said that knew exactly what they were talking about. The elder pauses and gestures to a tall, thin man across the circle. This new speaker launches into an animated debate about the comet's meaning, hands carving patterns in the air. Was it a sign of prosperity, a warning of change, or simply a rock on an extravagant vacation through the cosmos? He argues for the first, another scholar counters with the second, and soon the circle hums with good-natured disagreement. Someone jokes that perhaps the comet was just bored and wanted attention, drawing a ripple of laughter that feels like a warm blanket. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sounds blend. Laughter, argument, the soft clink of teacups, the occasional hiss of a lantern adjusting to the breeze. The effect is almost hypnotic. You think of how debate here is not a battle to win, but a shared game, a way to keep ideas alive through the long night. In this courtyard, every opinion has the calm confidence of the stars overhead. No one hurries, no one raises their voice, as if the desert itself enforces a gentle pace. When you open your eyes, the elder is telling another story, this one about a caravan that brought rare books from far-off Andalusia. The journey took months, across rivers and mountains and endless sand. Along the way, the travelers nearly lost their precious cargo to a sudden sandstorm, until he claims with a sly smile, a well-timed sneeze from a camel startled the group into changing course just in time. The listeners laugh softly, and you do too, picturing a camel as the accidental hero of intellectual history. The circle gradually shifts into a kind of open forum. A woman in a deep indigo shawl stands to recite a poem about the Niger River's floods, her voice so smooth it feels like silk running through your ears. A young man responds with a riddle about the moon's reflection in a well. Even the children scattered along the edges contribute questions sharp enough to make the scholars pause and smile. You realize you're witnessing something rare, a community where knowledge is shared, not hoarded, where even the smallest voice can ripple across the dunes. Overhead, a shooting star blazes briefly, carving a silver path across the darkness. The circle gasps and then falls silent. For a long breath, everyone simply watches the afterglow fade. The elder breaks the silence with a soft chuckle. "The sky approves of our debate," he says, and the gathering answers with quiet applause. It's as if the heavens themselves are part of the conversation. The tea flows again, the scent of mint mingling with the cool night air. You sip slowly, feeling the warmth of both the drink and the moment seep into you. There's no rush to leave, no agenda to complete. Here, learning is as natural as breathing, and time feels as infinite as the sky. You can almost forget the world beyond the dunes, emails, alarms, the constant tug of urgency. None of that matters under this patient moon. As the night deepens, some scholars drift away, their outlines fading into the gentle darkness like sentences at the end of a beloved book. The elder closes his manuscript and bows to the remaining listeners, who return the gesture with quiet reverence. You stand too, brushing sand from your robe, and feel a surprising lightness, as though the stories have lifted something from your shoulders. You take one last look at the courtyard, lanterns flickering low, scholars exchanging final whispers, a child chasing the last spark of a firefly across the sand. The image imprints itself in your memory like a carefully inked illustration. You turn toward the open desert once more, carrying with you the echo of voices, the taste of mint, and the calm certainty that knowledge shared under the stars becomes part of the night itself, a chapter written not just in parchment, but in the quiet hearts of those who listen. You drift away from the scholars' circle, the murmur of their voices fading like the last notes of a lullaby. The desert opens again, wide, silver, and impossibly still. Your steps leave only shallow impressions that the wind quickly smooths, as if the Sahara is too proud to display footprints for long. Overhead, the stars burn with a calm defiance, and the moon spills its light across the dunes like milk over velvet. For a while you walk without destination, guided only by the quiet pull of curiosity, until a low, broken wall appears ahead, half swallowed by sand. As you approach, the air changes. It carries a faint scent of charred wood, an echo of fire long extinguished. The wall leads to the ruins of a larger structure, stone foundations barely visible beneath layers of wind-blown earth. You kneel and brush the sand aside, revealing smooth bricks blackened at the edges. They crumble slightly beneath your fingers, fragile as burnt paper. Here once stood a library, or perhaps a home that sheltered books. Now it is a memory etched in ash. A sudden gust lifts a veil of sand and reveals more of the ruins. The curve of an archway, the outline of a courtyard, the jagged stumps of columns that must have reached proudly toward the sky. You imagine the place alive centuries ago, a sanctuary for thinkers, maybe a bustling marketplace of ideas. Historians still argue which specific fire consumed it. Was it the chaos of a civil skirmish, a careless cooking flame, or a deliberate act of war? The records blur like mirages, leaving only questions. And questions, you realize, can be more enduring than answers. You step over a low threshold into what remains of a main hall. The floor is a mosaic of stone and sand, each tile a small galaxy of color dulled by time. Here and there you spot fragments of parchment, brittle and dark, like autumn leaves. They disintegrate at a touch, so you keep your hands folded behind your back, respecting their delicate defiance. A faint hum of the wind through the broken arch almost sounds like distant chanting, the ghosts of scholars debating under a sky very much like tonight's. Farther in, a collapsed roof opens to the stars. You tilt your head and see Orion standing. Sentinel, the same constellation ancient astronomers charted in meticulous ink. Perhaps some of those charts once rested in this very hall. Perhaps a young student once looked up at these same stars. Quill paused, heart racing with the first thrill of understanding. The thought lingers like the aftertaste of mint tea. A movement catches your eye. A desert fox, small and pale, slips through the rubble with silent grace. It pauses to glance at you, eyes reflecting moonlight, then trots on, tail held high as if to say the night belongs to those who wander. You grin at the casual confidence of this four-legged historian, certain it knows the ruins better than any scholar. The wind rises again, carrying a low, steady moan through the broken columns. It sounds like a sigh, or perhaps a warning. You pull your robe tighter and imagine the night when flames first touched these walls. Maybe a spark leapt from an oil lamp, maybe a raiding party stormed the gates. You picture frantic scribes bundling manuscripts in cloth, racing toward the dunes as smoke curled like black ribbons into the sky. Some escaped, their treasures carried to safer havens. Others remained, trusting that stone walls could outlast chaos. The desert, indifferent and eternal, witnessed it all. You kneel beside a half-buried chest, its wood weathered to the softness of driftwood. The lock has long since surrendered to rust. Inside lies nothing but sand and a single shard of pottery, etched with faint geometric lines. You lift it gently, brushing off grit, and feel the cool weight of history in your palm. Perhaps it once held ink or spices or a simple evening meal. Its story has narrowed to mystery, yet somehow that makes it richer. A sudden flicker of lantern light draws your gaze to the far side of the hall. A figure stands there, a woman in a deep blue scarf, her silhouette framed by moonlight. For a moment you wonder if she is real or a mirage born of exhaustion. She raises a hand in quiet greeting, then gestures to the ruins around you. "Knowledge. Burns?" she says softly, her voice barely louder than the wind. But ideas scatter like seeds. Before you can respond, she turns and walks into the shadows, dissolving into the night, as if she were part of the desert itself. You blink, unsure if she was ever there. The silence that follows feels heavier, yet strangely comforting. You trace the pottery shard with your thumb, and think of all the stories lost to fire and sand, and of how fragments endure, waiting for someone, anyone, to listen. Modern historians still sift through these ruins, piecing together trade records, star maps, medicinal recipes. Each discovery sparks debate, each debate keeps the memory alive. Perhaps that is the truest survival, not the book itself, but the endless conversation it inspires. You wander through the rest of the site, each step revealing another ghost of architecture, a corner of a study room, the base of a stairway that once led to shelves of precious texts. You imagine the scholars who climbed it, robes brushing stone, minds alight with questions of medicine, lore, and distant galaxies. They argued late into the night, voices rising like the stars above them. Those voices are gone, yet their echoes cling to the stones, a quiet chorus you almost hear when the wind pauses. Finally, you reach the outer wall again. The horizon glows faintly with the first hint of dawn, a soft silver wash that turns the ruins to pale silhouettes. The night has flown, though you barely noticed. You tuck the pottery shard back into the chest, covering it with a handful of sand, a small gesture of respect, like closing a book after reading a favorite passage. As you step away, the breeze softens, carrying a faint smell of smoke that could be memory or simply the desert's own perfume. You glance back one last time. The ruins stand quiet and resolute, neither conquered nor fully revealed. They are a reminder that even in loss, there is a kind of persistence, a lesson written not on parchment, but in the endless patience of stone and sand. You walk on, the rising light outlining the dunes in gentle silver. Behind you, the lost library sleeps, its stories diffused into the desert air, its knowledge not gone but scattered, like seeds waiting for another curious soul, another quiet night to bloom again in the mind of someone willing to listen. The first hint of dawn hovers low on the horizon as you leave the blackened ruins behind, a faint silver wash that stretches across the dunes like a soft sigh. The air carries a fragile calm, the kind that follows both storms and stories, and the sand underfoot feels cooler now, almost damp with night's lingering breath. You walk toward that pale light, guided more by instinct than by any landmark, and soon a ribbon of shadow appears ahead, the slow, gleaming curve of the Niger River, waiting like an old friend. The river's surface mirrors the earliest stars, fading into morning, each ripple a quiet heartbeat. Centuries ago, this water was the great artery of knowledge, the highway that carried merchants, scholars, and manuscripts far beyond the Sahara. You imagine fleets of long, narrow boats slipping through the dawn mist, hulls heavy with scrolls wrapped in leather and silk. The manuscripts you glimpsed in Timbuktu rarely stayed there forever. They were restless travelers, seeking new mines as eagerly as the traders sought gold and salt. Historians still debate which paths were most influential, north toward the Maghreb, east toward Cairo, or across the sea to Europe, but the river never cared. It only flowed. You find a weathered dock where wooden poles lean like tired sentries. The scent of wet clay and reeds rises around you, a sudden, welcome change from the endless perfume of dust. A fisherman's boat drifts nearby, its hull painted in faded blues and yellows that recall old mosaics. He stands balanced as easily as a thought, casting a net with a fluid motion that seems older than memory. He notices you, offers a brief nod, and continues his work, the net unfurling like a story told without words. Along the bank, small villages stir to life, You hear the soft clatter of cooking pots and the muted laughter of children who should still be asleep. The smell of millet porridge wafts through the cool air, warm and nutty, blending with the river's damp scent. You smile, imagining scholars, centuries ago, tasting the same breakfast before setting out on long journeys, with manuscripts tucked safely under their arms. Perhaps a few of those pages still survive in some quiet library far from here, their edges browned but their ideas intact. A narrow path leads you to a market just beginning to wake. Merchants arrange baskets of dried fish, bright peppers and spices, whose fragrances swirl together like an improvised symphony. A woman with a voice rich as honey hums a song older than the city itself, while she ties bundles of mint with strips of palm fiber. You breathe in deeply, the sharp green scent of the herb mixing with the earthiness of river mud, and feel the desert night finally loosen its grip. You pause near a group of traders preparing for departure. Their camels kneel patiently as bundles of goods are strapped in place. Salt slabs, bolts of indigo cloth, and, tucked among them, a leather case you recognize instantly as a manuscript carrier. The sight makes your chest tighten with a quiet thrill. These texts are still on the move, still slipping between worlds as they have for centuries. One merchant notices your gaze and grins. Books travel farther than we do, he says, and you can't help but laugh at the truth in his words. Beyond the market, you spot a modest building of clay and wood, its walls painted with faded geometric patterns. Inside, the cool air smells faintly of cedar and ink. A young archivist sorts through a chest of manuscripts recently arrived from the north. She lifts one carefully, the leather cover soft with age, and opens it to reveal crisp black. Script on a parchment as thin as pressed petals. She smiles without looking up. "Knowledge never stops walking," she murmurs, as if continuing the merchant's thought. "It just changes shoes." The casual wisdom of the Sahara has a way of sounding like poetry. You wander through the room, eyes adjusting to the dim light. Some manuscripts hold astronomical charts so precise they could rival modern maps. Others contain medicinal recipes involving river herbs and desert minerals. Still others are simple collections of poetry, lines that speak of love, loss, and the unending dialogue between sand and water. Historians today debate which of these texts most shaped the world beyond Africa. Some argue the star charts influenced European navigation. Others insist the medical treatises quietly informed later discoveries. But standing here, surrounded by the hush of ink and ambition, you sense that every scroll mattered equally, each one a pebble dropped into a pond whose ripples reached far beyond sight. The archivist offers you a seat on a low wooden bench polished by countless visitors. She pours tea into small clay cups, strong, sweet, and fragrant with mint. You cradle the cup, letting its warmth seep into your fingers as she explains how these manuscripts travel, sometimes by caravan across the desert, sometimes hidden in cargo bound for Mediterranean ports, sometimes carried in secret by scholars fleeing conflict. Each journey is a story, each page a passport. You imagine them sailing through time, gathering tiny changes with each retelling, like travelers collecting stamps on a well-worn map. Outside, the sun begins to lift, casting the river in sheets of gold. The archivist rises and walks to the doorway, gazing at the brightening horizon. "The river remembers," she says softly. "It carries everything forward even when we forget." Her words settle in the air like a blessing. You finish your tea, savoring the final sweet bitterness, and thank her with a quiet nod. She returns the gesture, eyes shining with the same calm determination you've seen in every keeper of knowledge on this journey. You step back into the open morning. The market now hums with life. Children chasing each other between stalls, merchants calling prices, the occasional bleat of a restless goat. Yet beneath the bustle lies the same patient rhythm that has always defined this place. Boats push, off from the dock, their sails catching the first gentle breeze, each carrying goods and words alike. The manuscripts will continue their travels today, just as they did centuries ago, their ideas riding currents of water and curiosity. You linger on the riverbank, letting the scene etch itself into memory, the gleam of sun on water, the scent of mint and clay, the quiet pride of people who know that knowledge is wealth no storm can truly claim. The desert behind you still whispers, but the river speaks louder now, promising movement, connection, and the endless journey of ideas. As you turn to follow the path along its shore, you feel the pull of those traveling texts, and you understand that the story of the lost libraries is not a tale of endings, but of beginnings carried ever onward, one patient mile at a time. You follow the river's gentle curve for what feels like hours, the morning light deepening from silver to honey. The Niger flows broad and calm beside you, a liquid road older than memory, its surface dappled by slow-moving fishing boats. Each boat glides as if pulled by a quiet magnet, carrying bundles of trade goods, baskets of peppers, and sometimes, you suspect, a manuscript hidden beneath a woven mat. The air smells of wet clay and warming reeds, and every breath carries the taste of travel. Eventually, the path leads to a cluster of houses perched on a slight rise above the water. Their walls are painted with ochre and white patterns, geometric, spirals that catch the sunlight like ancient mathematics. A wooden sign carved with unfamiliar symbols marks the entrance to the settlement. You pause, tracing the grooves with your fingertips. The wood is smooth from countless hands before yours. The village has the feel of a gateway, neither entirely desert nor fully river, a meeting point where ideas linger before continuing their long migration. A narrow lane draws you inward. Children chase each other through clouds of breakfast smoke, their laughter bright as small bells. Women pound grain in tall mortars, the steady rhythm echoing like a low drumbeat beneath the chatter of traders preparing their boats. You smell millet porridge sweetened with dates, and a tang of dried fish warming over coals. The mingled aromas make your stomach grumble in gentle protest, and you think of how many travelers, merchants, scholars, wandering dreamers have started their mornings with the same scents curling through the dawn. Beyond the bustle lies a quieter quarter, where the houses are built of darker clay and the windows shielded by intricately carved screens. Here the air cools and the noise softens to a respectful hush. A man in a long indigo robe steps from a doorway, nodding in greeting. "The hidden rooms are ready," he says, as though he has been expecting you all along. Without waiting for her reply, he turns and disappears into the shaded interior. You follow, your curiosity tugging you like an invisible thread. The corridor smells of cedar and faint smoke. Lanterns set in deep niches throw a warm golden glow across walls lined with shelves. On those shelves rest bundles of parchment bound in soft leather, their edges frayed but proud. You catch your breath. These are the whispered treasures you have heard about from scholars and travelers alike. Manuscripts too precious to display in public, too fragile for the chaos of open markets. They wait here in patient darkness, a library disguised as a family home. Your host gestures toward a low table where several scrolls lie open. He lifts one with practiced care and spreads it before you. The parchment smells faintly of earth and time. The script flows in graceful black curves, each letter alive with purpose. He points to an illustration of stars arranged in a pattern you have never seen. A constellation shaped like a great sailing bird. A map of trade winds, he explains softly. Drawn before any European compass reached these waters, you feel the weight of centuries press lightly on your shoulders. Another manuscript reveals a recipe for a healing balm, desert herbs, mixed with powdered stone, and a drop of river water collected only at the first moon of spring. Whether it truly cured fevers or simply gave comfort, the careful handwriting tells of someone who believed knowledge could ease suffering. Historians still debate the origins of such texts. Some claim influence from distant Persia, others from local herbal traditions refined over countless generations. The argument, like the river, flows on without end. A door creaks open, and an elderly woman enters, her eyes bright as polished amber. She carries a small wooden box and sets it gently on the table. Inside lies a single folded parchment, wrapped in faded indigo cloth. She unwraps it with deliberate grace, revealing a document so delicate it seems spun from morning mist. Tiny gold flecks shimmer in the script when the lantern light catches it. "The star chart of the wandering fire," she whispers. "Drawn the night a comet crossed the sky like a spark from the god's own forge." You lean closer, mesmerized by the meticulous drawings of the comet's path, and wonder if it might be the same traveler that once startled European astronomers centuries later. The woman smiles, noticing your silent awe. "These pages are our true gold," she says. "The sand can bury a city. The river can change its course, but an idea travels where it wishes." Her voice is steady, but you hear in it the echo of generations who have guarded these words through droughts, raids, and the slow erosion of time. You picture ancestors sewing manuscripts into garments, hiding them beneath baskets of grain, carrying them across deserts with the same care others reserve for their own heartbeat. Your host pours tea, dark, fragrant, sweet with honey. The steam curls upward, mingling with the lamplight. You sip slowly, the warmth anchoring you in the present even as your mind drifts across centuries. The room hums with quiet life, the soft rasp of turning pages, the occasional creak of wood settling, the steady rhythm of your own breath. Outside, the village continues its morning chorus, but in here time folds in on itself, each second as deliberate as the strokes of a scribe's quill. After a long silence, the elder woman carefully rewraps the comet manuscript and places it back, in the box. She presses the lid closed and slides it toward the far corner, where shadows hide its exact resting place. "The river will take these one day," she says almost to herself, "not to drown them, but to carry them forward when we can no longer guard them." Her words settle like a gentle command. Nothing stays, everything flows. You rise reluctantly, thanking your hosts with a nod and a quiet shukran that earns you a soft smile. As you step back into the sunlit lane, the heat of late morning has begun to thrum. Children's laughter rings through the village like bright bells, and the smell of roasting grains drifts across the breeze. Behind you, the hidden library returns to its silence, its treasures safe for another day, another century. Following the path back toward the river, you feel a subtle shift inside yourself, as though those manuscripts have already begun their journey through you. The wind off the water tastes faintly of mint and distant rain, a reminder that movement is the natural state of all things, knowledge, rivers, even wandering souls. Ahead, boats bob gently, ready to carry goods and words, alike toward lands unknown, and you too feel ready to follow, another traveler in the endless migration of ideas. The sun climbs higher as you leave the hidden library behind, its heat folding across the landscape in shimmering waves. The village sounds fade, children's laughter, the rhythmic pounding of grain, until only the steady hush of the river keeps you company. You follow a narrow path where reeds sway like tall green metronomes, their tips glittering with beads of dew that somehow resist the rising warmth. Each breath carries a mix of clay, mint, and the faint metallic tang of moving water, and you sense that this stretch of the Niger has been a silent courier of stories for millennia. Before long, the path bends toward a wider clearing where a handful of low, pale tents cluster beneath acacia trees. Their fabric ripples gently in the morning breeze, and a wooden sign at the entrance reads in careful Arabic script, "Center for Ancient Manuscripts, Restoration and Study." You pause, blinking in surprise. The words feel both impossibly modern and perfectly inevitable, as if the past and present finally agreed to share the same breath. Inside the main tent, the air is cool and sweet with the scent of cedar shavings and linen. Long tables are covered with parchment sheets, brushes, and delicate instruments that gleam in the filtered light. A young archivist looks up from her work, a magnifying lens balanced over one eye like an elegant monocle. "Welcome," she says, softly, her voice carrying a calm authority. "We're still waking the old words." She gestures for you to step closer. You move carefully between the tables, eyes drawn to the manuscript spread open like patient birds. One sheet displays a star map, dotted with minuscule gold points, the constellations connected by lines, so fine they seem to hover above the surface. Another shows a medical treatise detailing herbal remedies, desert mint for fever, powdered meteorite for lingering coughs. The archivist explains that many of these works were buried or hidden for centuries, only to reappear when villagers, farmers, or wandering shepherds unearthed them by chance. "The desert preserved them better than any vault," she says, "but they still need new guardians." At another table, a conservator delicately brushes sand from a cracked leather binding. His movements are slow, almost reverent, as though he's coaxing the book awake from a long sleep. He looks up and smiles wryly. These pages survived storms, wars, even termites, he says. It's the impatient humans they fear most. You laugh softly, recognizing the gentle rebuke in his words. Patience is the currency here, as valuable as any ink or gold. Nearby, a group of children sits cross-legged, each holding a small tablet coated in wet clay. A teacher guides their hands as they etch careful lines, recreating the ancient scripts with reed pens. The kids giggle when a stroke goes awry, but they quickly correct it, their tiny brows furrowed in concentration. The sight tugs at you, the oldest writing reborn in the youngest fingers. Historians still debate whether this practice accurately preserves technique or simply honors tradition. But either way, the joy on the children's faces is proof enough of its value. The archivist leads you to a low shelf where a particular manuscript rests beneath a pane of crystal. The leather cover is a deep, weathered brown, and the pages inside shimmer faintly as though kissed by moonlight. "We found this only last year," she whispers, "buried under a collapsed wall near Timbuktu. It's a legal code for caravan trade, written in 3 languages. She smiles, eyes bright. It describes how merchants were to settle disputes, share water, and even split profits on camel repairs. You can't help but grin at the mundane detail. Scholars still debate whether the rules were universally enforced or mostly aspirational, a reminder that human bureaucracy has always been both practical and slightly comedic. You step back as a breeze rustles the tent, lifting the edges of the crystal case just enough to release a faint scent of cedar and something older, like warm dust after rain. The sensation is oddly grounding, as though centuries compress into a single inhalation. The archivist watches you quietly, then says, "Knowledge doesn't belong to one era. It travels, hides, waits, and sometimes laughs at our timelines." Her words settle around you like a gentle spell. From the far side of the tent comes a low rhythmic sound, a hand drum pulsing in a slow heartbeat. You turn to see an elderly man seated on a mat, eyes half closed, tapping a simple pattern. A few of the children gather near him, swaying softly. He begins to chant a poem in a language you don't recognize, the syllables rising and falling like the river's own current. The archivist leans closer and explains, "It's a song ode to the desert winds. We recite it each morning to remind ourselves that everything we restore once lived as song before it became text." You listen, the drumbeat weaving with the chant until it becomes the only sound you hear, a bridge of music stretching across centuries. Outside, the sun has climbed toward noon, but the tent remains a cool pocket of timelessness. The archivist offers you a final cup of tea, the mint sharp and refreshing. "Carry what you've seen," she says quietly. "Words survive only when someone remembers." You nod, the truth of it settling deep. These manuscripts have endured. Storms and silence, but memory, human, fallible, persistent, remains their most faithful shelter. As you step back into the open air, the brilliance of the desert momentarily blinds you. The river gleams like a sheet of hammered gold, and the reeds sway in a slow, deliberate dance. You glance back at the tents, their fabric rippling gently as if exhaling. Inside, scribes continue their delicate work. Children etch lines of ancient script, and drums echo the steady heartbeat of history. The Sahara may hide its treasures, but here on the river's edge, people coax them into the light, patient as dawn. You walk along the bank once more, the heat rising from the sand in shimmering waves. A fisherman calls out a greeting, his boat, heavy with fresh catch. In the distance, a caravan moves along the horizon, camels stepping in silent rhythm, their shadows stretching long and thin. You watch until the shapes blend with the dunes, a living reminder that the journey of knowledge never truly ends. It only changes form, moving from scroll to memory, from ink to voice, from ancient library to the mind of whoever is willing to listen. The path from the restoration tents leads you away from the bright riverbank into a quieter sweep of dunes where acacia trees cast islands of shade. Afternoon sunlight falls in slow golden sheets, softening every edge of the horizon. You pause at the crest of a low ridge and look back. The tents are now tiny specks of white against the rippling silver of the Niger. The faint echo of a hand drum still carries on the breeze, steady and reassuring, like the heartbeat of history itself. Ahead lies a small settlement, little more than a scatter of mud brick homes and reed fences. Smoke curls lazily from clay chimneys, carrying the scent of roasting grains and sweet date syrup. Children chase each other across the sand, their laughter bright enough to startle a resting heron into flight. You step closer, drawn by the simple life unfolding here, and find yourself greeted by a woman in a deep indigo shawl. She offers a smile that feels both new and ancient. "I have come to hear the stories of the guardians," she says, her voice warm as late sunlight. "They are waiting." She leads you along a narrow lane to a shaded courtyard where elders sit in a half-circle beneath a thatched awning. Each holds a manuscript or a small carved box, and each face is a landscape of years, lines etched by sun, wind, and quiet determination. The air smells of mint tea and cedar, and the hush carries the gravity of ceremony. One elder, a man with a silver beard and eyes bright as polished amber, gestures for you to join them. "We keep the words," he says simply. "When storms come, when wars pass, we keep them." They begin to speak one by one, their voices weaving a tapestry of memory. A woman recounts how her grandmother once hid an entire chest of manuscripts beneath a goat pen during a raid, the smell of hay masking the scent of leather. Another elder tells of carrying a bundle of scrolls across the desert, sewn into the lining of a robe, each step a prayer that the sand would not claim them. "The desert is patient," he says with a soft chuckle, "but so are we." You hear quiet laughter ripple through the group, a shared recognition of stubbornness as survival. A young man sets a wooden box before you and lifts the lid to reveal a single manuscript wrapped in faded blue cloth. He unwraps it carefully, revealing pages of fine calligraphy and small intricate illustrations of herbal plants. "These cures kept our people alive," he explains. "Some ingredients are gone now, but the knowledge remains." Historians still debate the origins of such texts. Were they gifts from traders of distant Persia, or careful records of local healers? The elders merely smile at the question. For them, the origin matters less than the continuity. The conversation drifts to the present, to the quiet struggle of protecting these treasures in a modern world hungry for quick information, but impatient with slow care. One elder shakes his head gently. "People come asking for digital copies, for scanned images," he says. "They forget that knowledge is more than sight. It is smell, touch, the sound of a page turning." His words settle over the courtyard, like fine dust, undeniable in their weight. You notice how the manuscripts are handled, not just with caution but with affection. Every page turned is a small act of devotion. Children sit cross-legged at the edge of the gathering, eyes wide as they watch their elders. From time to time, an elder beckons a child forward to hold a manuscript for a moment, letting small fingers feel the texture of leather and the gentle ridges of script. You sense that this is how memory survives, not in vaults or glass cases, but in the quiet passing of weight from one hand to another. As the sun tilts westward, the woman who first welcomed you brings a tray of tea. The aroma of mint and honey drifts through the courtyard, mingling with the earthy scent of parchment. Cups clink softly as they are passed around. You sip, the warmth unfurling through you like a slow melody, and listen as the elders share fragments of songs once sung during long desert crossings. Their voices blend into a low hum, and for a moment the courtyard itself seems to vibrate with centuries of endurance. One elder leans toward you, his eyes reflecting the late light. "Do you see?" he asks quietly. "The library is not only a place. It is the people who remember, who speak the words aloud. Without us, the desert keeps only silence." His statement lingers like the aftertaste of tea, gentle yet unshakable. You nod, understanding that these guardians are living manuscripts, their memories as valuable as the inked pages they protect. A breeze stirs, carrying with it a hint of evening coolness and the first notes of crickets beginning their nocturnal chorus. Shadows lengthen across the courtyard, painting the sand in deep blue. The elders close their manuscripts and tie the cloths with slow precision. One by one they rise, their movements deliberate, each step an echo of centuries of care. Children help gather cushions and clay cups, their small hands moving with a solemnity beyond their years. The woman in the indigo shawl walks you back toward the village edge. The sky above is a canvas of molten orange fading to violet, and the first stars flicker awake. She stops at the ridge overlooking the river and gestures toward the horizon where the dunes meet the twilight. "Tomorrow," she says softly. "New winds will blow and perhaps new seekers will come. We will still be here, keeping the words." Her certainty feels as steady as the earth beneath your feet. You linger a moment longer, the scent of mint and cedar still clinging to your clothes, the memory of the elders' voices humming in your ears. The guardians fade back into the village behind you, their silhouettes merging with the deepening dusk. Ahead, the desert stretches vast and quiet, stars gathering like countless tiny lanterns to light your way. You step forward, carrying with you the weight of their devotion and the fragile, luminous truth that knowledge survives not because it hides, but because someone always chooses to remember. Night returns as you leave the village of guardians, the last glow of sunset fading into a velvet sky stitched with stars. The air cools quickly, carrying the faint sweetness of mint tea and wood smoke from distant fires. You walk along a narrow ridge where the dunes roll like a quiet ocean, their crests silvered by moonlight. Each step makes a soft hiss, the sound of sand rearranging itself, erasing your path almost before it forms. It feels as though the desert is guiding you toward a final embrace, a slow unwinding of everything you've seen and heard. The river lies behind you now, but you can still hear its gentle murmur, a memory of movement beneath the hush. Ahead, the dunes open into a wide plain where the wind flows in long, even breaths. You pause, closing your eyes, to let the rhythm seep in. Inhale, exhale, a steady lullaby, older than any library. The sky above is a dark dome dusted with stars, so many and so sharp they seem to hum faintly. You think of every manuscript you've encountered on this journey, the star charts, the herbal remedies, the poems about comets and love, and realize that the heavens are the oldest manuscript of all, written in light no storm can erase. A low ridge shelters a hollow of sand, and you settle there, the ground cool against your palms. The wind drifts around you like a soft blanket, carrying tiny grains that tickle your skin. You remember the first monastery where the keeper whispered that the sands speak when they choose. Tonight they murmur gently, the tone almost playful, as if congratulating you for listening. Somewhere far off, a jackal calls once and falls silent, and the sound blends perfectly with the endless hush. Your mind wanders back through the path you've taken, the lamplit alleys of Timbuktu, the storm that revealed a scrap of lost parchment, the patient scribes who wrote by starlight, the elders who hid manuscripts beneath goat pens and in the linings of robes. Every scene overlaps like translucent pages. Each memory another line in a single unbroken story. You can almost hear the scratch of quills, the quiet debates about comets and trade winds, the laughter of children etching letters into wet clay. Historians still argue over which manuscripts changed the world the most, but you know now that every scrap mattered, because each carried the voice of someone who refused to let silence win. A breeze ruffles your robe, cool and dry, and with it comes the scent of cedar and faint smoke, a ghost of every tea you've shared along the way. You smile at the thought of the archivist's gentle warning. Knowledge doesn't belong to one era, it travels and waits. Perhaps these very sands cradle texts still undiscovered, sleeping patiently until another seeker stumbles by. You picture future travelers pausing as you have, brushing dust from a fragment of leather, feeling the quiet thrill of connection across centuries. The moon climbs higher, bright enough to paint soft shadows across the dunes. You lean back, watching Orion's belt draw a perfect line through the sky. Maybe the same pattern guided those ancient caravans, its stars steady companions for scholars and merchants alike. The thought is comforting. The heavens unchanged, while everything below shifts and drifts. Even as libraries burned or were buried, these stars kept their silent vigil, a celestial index no sandstorm could reorder. You stretch your legs and sink deeper into the hollow, the sand shaping itself to your body like a patient mattress. A faint vibration seems to rise through the ground, a trick of imagination perhaps, or the subtle heartbeat of the desert itself. You listen, letting the sound blend with your own pulse until you can't tell where you end and the Sahara begins. The night no longer feels vast and indifferent. It feels alive, an ancient companion content to share its quiet. Your thoughts drift to the people who still guard the manuscripts today, the children tracing letters in clay, the elders sipping tea as they recount stories of daring escapes and clever concealments. They are the living continuation of the lost libraries, their voices a bridge that spans centuries. You remember the old man's words, "The library is not only a place, it is the people who remember." That sentence settles into you like warm sand filling a footprint. You realize you've been walking not just through geography, but through a living mind, a vast memory kept alive by devotion and gentle stubbornness. Another breeze glides across the dunes, cooler now, carrying the faint metallic scent that comes before dawn. The stars shimmer like ink on fresh parchment, and the moonlight turns the sand to silver silk. You close your eyes and let the sensations blur. The soft rasp of wind, the distant murmur of the river, the echo of ancient voices debating comets and cures. Time stretches, loosens, and finally dissolves. The journey is no longer a sequence of places, but a single, unending presence. You inhale slowly, exhale even slower. The desert responds with its own long breath, and for a moment you are certain. The Sahara is whispering directly to you. It says nothing you can translate, yet the meaning is clear. Everything flows, everything endures. The manuscripts, the rivers, the stars, even your own wandering thoughts. They are all part of one great migration of memory. The night deepens, but instead of darkness you feel a soft radiance, a gentle invitation to rest. Your limbs grow heavy, the cool sand supporting every curve. The hush of the desert wraps around you like a vast warm quilt. In the distance, a single owl calls, its note long and low, then fades into perfect stillness. Your breathing slows to match the slow pulse of the earth. Images drift like feathers. A scribe bent over a glowing page, a caravan bell chiming in rhythm with the stars, a child laughing as she presses a reed into wet clay. Each vision softens and melts into the next, until they are simply the quiet music of sleep. Now the dunes themselves seem to sway with a lullaby only you can hear. The wind hums, the sand settles, and the stars lean closer, their light a final benediction. You let your eyes close fully, the weight of history and distance dissolving into a single endless moment of peace. The Sahara breathes once more, slow and deep, and you breathe with it. Nothing more is required. Nothing more needs to be said. End of script. Sweet dreams.